Hello, and welcome back to Apple Park.
Thanks, Tim. Now, let's talk Apple. So you've been living under a tech rock. Last night, Apple did their big October event, which included both the HomePod Mini and the new lineup of iPhones. Now, being in the UK, with the event being over in the United States, I've had a little bit of benefit from sleeping and having a bit more time to think about it and my first impressions of the event. So this video, we're going to go through what we know. Importantly, should you really buy the new lineup of iPhones? And probably less importantly, my first impressions. So let's start this video off with the HomePod Mini.
What are you thinking? What are you looking at? What do you got? Getting ready to rock that.
So the HomePod Mini, okay, a nice new product to see in the Apple lineup, but one that I still find probably quite hard to recommend to most people out there. Obviously, what's really difficult with a speaker, unless we actually had it in here and I could test it out, I can't confirm or deny how good the HomePod sounds.
He had it sound amazing. We started by custom designing every acoustic element.
Now, knowing Apple, with some of the improvements they have made using tech to influence audio, things like the AirPod Pros, and the HomePod was well known for being a great sounding speaker. The problem is it's meant to be designed as a smart speaker as well. And the two main problems that I find with the HomePod as a product lineup is two things really, services and Siri. Like many of you at home, I use Spotify as my music choice of streaming service. It has been for years and years and years. And let's be honest, Spotify have poured themselves out.
It is true what they say about the northern girls.
To every tech company in the world to be on their products. So in this room alone, I have an Xbox, a PlayStation, a Google Home, my Mac, my iPhone, and a Pixel 4a. All of them run Spotify. Not all of these products run things like Apple Music, and that is why for me, I still choose Spotify over Apple Music. And one of the big announcements with the HomePod was that there is still no real Spotify integration.
And of course, HomePod Mini can play all of your favorite content. In addition to Apple Music, you can listen to all your favorite podcasts, along with thousands of radio stations from iHeartRadio, radio.com, and TuneIn.
Which, for me, kills the product dead in the water. But second on that list as well is Siri. Now, Siri, out of the three assistants, which is Google Assistant, obviously Amazon's Alexa, and then Siri.
Siri is what makes a smart speaker, well, smart.
You have to objectively probably put Siri last. It's not what Apple, I think, intended it to be. If I think about the devices that are out there at the moment with the new lineup of Google products and Amazon, which have just been announced within the past month, you probably have to say that if you're basing it on services and flexibility, those two lineups win. So the HomePod might sound great, and it could be a recommendation if you are all in on Apple. Right, so let's talk about why you're really here, which is the new lineup of iPhones, the iPhone 12. The way I'll put this video together, and probably do it slightly differently to other YouTubers that have already put videos out there, I'll do kind of what we know, the kind of good, the bad, the ugly, and then why, what my thoughts are just at the end to keep you going. And remember, if you want to see more Apple tech news, reviews, and opinions, you can hit the subscribe button, which is like down here. And in regards to this video, yeah, leave a like, a dislike, it's your choice, and leave some comments below about what you also think about Apple's event lineup. Let's get into the iPhone 12. Right, so in terms of the good, I guess, we have 5G across the board.
Today, we're bringing 5G to iPhone.
Apple have reinvented 5G. 5G is finally here because Apple have decided to put it in their phones. So 5G is now a thing. In reality, what iPhone and Apple and everyone is doing really at the moment with 5G is future-proofing their devices. Now, in the UK, I've seen some adverts for 5G, but there still really isn't the, network distribution of 5G available to make it a liable reason to buy a phone outright for that one reason. Now, in the United States, I listen to a lot of Vergecast, and they really hone in on things like 5G and the distribution of what's going on with the internet. And in reality, it seems as though 5G is probably even worse in America. So I don't think 5G is necessarily the reason to buy a phone in 2020, but it is the kind of reason to keep a phone for another 3 or 4 years without thinking, oh, it's now ready, I need to get one. So that is one thing that all have universal. So let's break down the phones. So we have the iPhone 12, the iPhone 12 mini, not having to compensate for anything there, the iPhone 12 Pro, and then the iPhone 12 Pro Max 5G. Shiny. One of the things that Apple said was this.
It has an all-new design that's simply stunning.
In reality, it is a brand new design. It's kind of like an amalgamation of an iPhone 5, an iPhone 10, and an iPhone 11 with a couple of other bits. It's kind of like a super iPhone combined. I wouldn't necessarily say it was an all new design, but what is new is a new A14 chip that Apple have thrown into every single one of the new devices. The A14 is a first ever 5nm chipset, which for a mobile device, that is amazing. Improvements should be obviously just the normal really, which is improvements in performance, but because of those performance improvements, we should have better battery life. Something that is also new is getting rid of LCD, and these are now all OLED displays. So gone with the LCD of the iPhone 11, which to be fair, everyone was pretty happy with, but now this is a much nicer display, bringing it in line with the 11 Pro last year. What is also new is new glass, which isn't glass. It's not glass, but their ceramic shield. Now this is next level grade nanometer kind of technology in regards to glass, which supposedly is going to be 4 times stronger than previous generations of glass. Now, from experience of seeing an awful lot of smashed screens in my life, I would probably still advise to get one of the new cases or just a case, because let's be honest, they're not going to be cheap to replace if this is totally new glass. That is something no one thinks of when they buy these fancy phones. But let's be honest, in reality, when you compare iPhone to the rest of the market for this year, if they hadn't put OLED on at this price point, I think people might have been a little bit angry. So I'm glad to see OLED across the board. That is an improvement. One thing that hasn't disappeared is the notch, and that has been a legacy since the iPhone 10, obviously with Face ID. Would I've liked to have seen maybe a slightly reimagined design or a thinner notch? I don't know. You do get used to the notch after a while, and using other devices you get used to their hole punches or different ways of designing it, but the notch is still there. It won't look too different. So this is where we start to see a slight different invariance between the 12 lineup and the 12 Pro lineup. So with the phones being very similar, this is where we start to see a slight difference, and that is with the camera set. On the iPhone 12 and 12 mini, we see 2 cameras and slightly different variants. And then on the Pro line, we see 3 cameras, very much like the difference between the iPhone 11 and the 11 Pro last year. Now gone on the iPhone 12 is the telephoto lens. So in my time of using the XS, which also has a standard and telephoto lens, I do have to say, and I think the majority of you at home would agree, that the telephoto is the least used lens on an iPhone. What we saw massively, and I don't know about you, but I definitely did, we see a lot more people on the 11 Pro using the ultra wide. Ultra wide was all over my Instagram stories, and I think that gave a slightly different perspective to what people were doing. So they have gone and opted for an ultra wide on the iPhone 12, which I think is an absolute brilliant stroke. Ultra wide definitely on the iPhone 12. All the phones do get bumps in software as well with the cameras. Obviously with that new chip, they've gone with HDR3, which I'm hoping compared to my iPhone XS is not the mess and noisy mess that they made HDR on there. And there were massive improvements on the iPhone 11, and I can see that there are going to be bigger improvements on the iPhone 12. As well as HDR, night mode is on every single camera module, but the only slight difference here is that Deep Fusion is only on the Pro lineup. Okay. Overall, I think we're all going to see brilliant cameras in both the iPhone 12 and the Pro line. But with the Pro line, there are then differences in the Pro line, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing. So obviously, as I say, we have 3 cameras in the Pro, and then we have the Pro Max, which has a much better lens setup and sensor setup, and is the one that you should get. So with the iPhone 11 Pro variants, I do think if you are a prosumer level iPhone photography and videographer fan, I do think the Max is where you're going to have to go. If you're already looking at spending over £1,000 on a phone, probably the main reason is the camera, and the Max has a much better camera setup. As well as a larger sensor, that sensor is also stabilized, very much like the camera I'm using now, the A7 III, which actually moves the sensor. The iPhone's going to do the same thing as well. In reality, that is Pro level hardware and is not available in the Pro. So if you are a Pro, you really need to go to Pro Max. As well, on this lens setup, you've then got the LiDAR, which we first saw in the iPad Pro this year, and like MKBHD said, in reality, this is going to benefit much more on an iPhone than it is ever on an iPad. The biggest thing for me using that LiDAR is actually basically night sight AF, which really looked like Batman in Batman Dark Knight. Yeah, that was awesome to see. And the autofocus in low light is going to be probably the best on a phone that we've ever seen. But with the improvements to the Max and how good the iPhone 12 is, the Pro, I don't know. I think that is maybe going to be a slightly difficult sell. I guess we'll have to see the figures when it comes out. So rounding the iPhone 12 part off is the new introduction of reintroducing the revolutionary technology, MagSafe. MagSafe, for people who can't remember or maybe have just had iPhones, is the actually quite awesome technology of using magnets with your cables. Now, the MacBook behind me still has MagSafe. It's the 2015 versions. Before they went to USB-C, they had a little magnet where the charger was, so if the charger fell, your laptop didn't. Actually really clever. And I'm glad to see it as a basically reimagining of how wireless charging works on iPhone. But the one thing, as well as adapting to MagSafe, probably was to try and, I don't know, shift our eyes away from the bottom of the phone, which still has Lightning and not USB-C. It's 2020 and it still doesn't have USB-C. So let's chat about, now that the hype of the best marketing company in the world has slightly settled, are the bits that's kind of, I don't know, frustrated me about this lineup. Now, like I just said, USB-C. USB-C is quite a confusing relationship with Apple. Back in 2016, they basically got rid of every single port on the MacBook Pro and MacBook lineup for USB-C, saying this is the future of connectivity. We've then seen it on the iPad Pro lineup and now the new iPad Air that USB-C is going to be on there. For pro consumer level people, this has actually been amazing. Like as I say, the Sony A7 III has got USB-C in it, and I can just connect the camera to the iPad or a MacBook and just transfer data. Whereas Lightning has been, well, it's been around for a little while. It first got introduced on the iPhone 5. Now, I was still at university when that got introduced, and I remember the uproar that it caused that they went away from the 30-pin plug. It has been many, many years, and USB-C has really grown in popularity and university around Android devices. It's now been on them for, I would probably say, 2 years. And I still can't believe that this year Apple didn't put USB-C on the bottom of the iPhone. when you look at what video capability the Pro Max and the Pro have, apart from if you're going to airdrop that information or send it over 5G, the easiest and quickest way to transfer that data would have been USB-C to USB-C or even USB-A. It's really confusing to see that still in 2020 they are going with a proprietary connection of Lightning. It's a bit silly now. Next is something we knew wasn't going to come to the phones, but is also, again, for 2020, something that's really surprising, which is ProMotion or 120Hz displays. Apple are totally flexing about, wait, I just have to get this right, 4K 60 frames a second Dolby Vision HDR recording on the iPhone Pro. So incredible video capability, a new format that no one else has ever been able to record, not just on a phone, but even on a camera. If you care so much about your video capability, you're spending over £1,000 on a phone, you probably also care about how great the display is. Using the iPad Pro in that 120Hz and its variable refresh rate, you really can tell a difference. And if you're spending that much on a device, and that's what you're wanting, then 120Hz probably could send you to another device. Even if Apple had to charge slightly more for a Pro version of a Pro phone with ProMotion, I actually do think they would have sold those devices to the really power-hungry users. For most people, 60Hz is perfectly fine, but for that small amount of people that really do want it, it probably could maybe make them wait another year to pick up a new iPhone. And the last thing really to round off my little rant about some of the things Apple have missed out on is something that I think has kind of affected us all this year, and something I think they've missed the mark on. And I bring that down to one thing, which is masks. I have no idea what this is going to sound like. So like many of you, I have to wear a mask if I'm going out and about anymore. It's kind of just part of our lives. And one of the things that an iPhone cannot do is unlock. Apologies if that sounded terrible. So with Face ID, obviously you kind of need the majority of your face to work out that this is me and unlock. And in practice, it's actually been really good on my iPhone XS. But the one thing that has been even better since having to wear a mask is, is this phone with a fingerprint reader. A fingerprint reader. A fingerprint reader that is actually coming to the iPad Air. I think Apple have missed out a huge opportunity for an awful lot of users at the moment who are having to wear masks. Having a Touch ID brought back to the iPhone, I think could have been an absolute masterstroke, especially saying that Apple had basically been producing masks. So I do think that could have been something that this year would have really set this phone apart. And as I say, it's got on Google phones. Okay, so that is me talking quite a lot about iPhones, and I'm going to stop now. But I am going to get these into review. They are obviously going to be some of the biggest phones that are out this year. It's going to be really interesting to see and compare it to an iPhone XS, the Google Pixel 4a that I'm trying out at the moment. So if you're really interested in any of the lineup, please let me know below by, as I say, subscribing, liking, and commenting what you want to see from the reviews when these phones drop in about 2 weeks. So I've been Ben, thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.